Hey everyone, Yoiston here, and I hope you all are doing well, wherever you are in Middle-earth. Today I am joined by the 10th Nazgul himself. Royan, how are you, man, and are you still on the run from the pesky Gondorians?
I'm actually raising an army to come back right now. We're going to come back from the south.
We love to
Um,
hear it!
yeah, listen, what happened last time, that wasn't my fault. Okay? It was the Witch King getting way too cocky. All
Mm-hmm.
right? And
You told him not
Sauron
to.
being way too dumb. Like, I told him, like, listen, I know the prophecy says, like, can't be killed by a man or whatever, but
Mm-hmm.
that's just what people say.
Yeah,
We haven't
yeah.
tested it. We don't know if it's true. And
Yeah, he could have
also
been
at the
lying.
same
He could have been
time,
lying.
there's more than men out there, my man. Come on.
That's
Like,
true. That's true. I mean, equally, this crazy dwarf cutting off heads on the field of Pelennor could have just
like,
run right up to him and done the same thing.
like, let's not forget what actually happened, where a woman and a hobbit got his ass. Like, did you see that elf? Dude, he was doing mad trick shots. Like,
He was.
just one of those could have killed him, according to this dumb
The
prophecy. So, like, what's he doing out there, my man? Like, also, why don't you have armor over your face, my guy? Come on.
True. Hashtag Royan is a better Witch King than the Witch King.
Listen, we can do it better, and we're gonna
Yes, sir.
right now. All right, so don't tell any Gondorians, but we're coming back.
We're getting them. We're getting them. Well, I love that. Thanks for joining me today, Royan. We got.
Glad to be here.
Oh yeah, we've got lots of topics today, and hopefully the audio this time is better than it was last time. Sorry about that. We hopefully figured things out this time. So we'll just go ahead and jump right in since there's a lot here. So on Patreon, Metal Guy 87 asks about the overall geography / landscapes and the climate of Beleriand, Middle-earth, Numenor, and Valinor, and how this might have affected life and events in the various regions. So before turning this question over to Royan, as because I know this is his stuff.
Right up my alley.
Oh yeah, I'll say that from kind of like I guess a bit of a geopolitical story. This is, I've always said Middle Earth is kind of like, northwestern Europe, kind of medieval times, right? So that I feel like if you kind of compare Europe's climate and all of that and landscapes to Middle Earth, you won't be far off. And I mean, yeah, Ryan, you want to take it away?
Yeah, so let's start with Beleriand and Middle Earth being quite literally right next to each other. They're gonna have basically the same kind of climate as far as like geography goes. I imagine that they're very similar, if not basically the exact same.
Yeah. Honestly, if you took both maps, had somebody who had never read either the Silmarillion or the Lord of the Rings or anything, you took both maps and then changed the names, they would look eerily similar. Like,
yes,
for
they
sure.
would. It would be like a noticeable difference, but you wouldn't quite be able to understand exactly why at first.
Yeah,
until you explain what's the background and what's happening with that. As far as we're gonna go to Valinor next. Valinor, that's like there's no real way for us to know anything about Valinor. Like,
yeah, it's like we know that there are definitely a lot of mountains there and things like that, but it's really hard to, like, we do not have the in-depth descriptions.
And all the descriptions we do have through the frame narrative are basically hearsay. Like, somebody else is explaining something to somebody who now is explaining it to.
That's true. Like, I mean, honestly, even in the first chapters of the Silmarillion and stuff, like, it doesn't go into too much detail on the landscape of Valinor. And honestly, what we do
I think it's intentional. I think it's absolutely
Yeah.
intentional, because when you think about Tolkien's writing, you think a lot about how he describes the settings and how in depth he'll go on some of these settings. But he does not describe that in the same way as Valinor, and I think that's intentional. I think Valinor is supposed to be a mystery, a mysterious land of the Valar. Like, it's in the name. But, as far as Numenor goes, Numenor is a special case because it is a island nation, for lack of a better term. And it's quite small when you think about it, to have such a massive sphere of influence. And because of that, for me, historically, we know that usually when large empires arise from small islands, Britain, there has to be something that they have that other people don't. Like they have to have some sort of resource. They have to be able to figure out life at home before they can go out and like influence the rest of the world.
That's true. Like, I guess would you say Britain's main thing was like fertile lands and
Coal.
like coal? Oh, okay, that makes sense.
Coal helped a lot, but even like the British Empire was still kind of getting going before like most coal. I think it was mostly just that they were able to. I'm not nearly an expert at British history as I imagine some people who would live there, but I have done some research, and I do know that after the Romans left Britain, there was like a lot of different wars with the Vikings and all stuff like that. And the fact that the Vikings came in and influenced their culture to the point where they could have like a really strong understanding of how to make good ships. Like I think that helped a lot.
That makes sense. Well, and that brings up something interesting that I haven't really thought much about, right? Like we have Anglo-Saxon, and I wonder if like the stand-in for that in Tolkien's works is like the Hadorian Baorian kind of thing. Like you have the House of Baor, which is they're more roughy, like they're a little more like rough, living in the wild. Edges. Yeah, they aren't as kingly as the House of Hador, and then yeah, you have the House of Hador, which is a little bit more like we live in cities and we fight right for the elven lords. We don't like live in the wilds and stuff. Those two houses came together. You have some of the House of Haleth as well, but you have mostly those two coming together and then making the Númenóreans. So I wonder if that's kind of like supposed to be the Anglo-Saxon coming together.
From a geological standpoint, and I will only be brief on this, there are basically two ways to have an island. Just trying to make sure, because this is like I'm by no means I am technically a licensed geologist now, but I'm not a practicing licensed geologist, so I'm technically not a professional. But unless I'm forgetting something drastic from my schooling, which is possible, I'm pretty sure there's only really two ways to have an island. You either have like a volcanic island that is growing up, or you have what was once a big piece of land that has sunk to the point where an elevated position is now an island. Again, the British Isles. That's what they are. Europe used to be bigger, and then it got flooded.
See, and that's actually a theory that I know some people have about Númenor, is that it's interesting that it rose right after Númenor fell.
That's what I think. Mm-hmm. But, when it comes to... there's two things here. One, this is fantasy. We already have elves and dwarves running around. And that's magic.
The gods were like, hey, we'll give you this island.
They can just raise an island from the bottom. And it doesn't have to be volcanic. It can be whatever it wants. But at the same time, this is a hearsay. Somebody trying to make sense of what they've been told from the frame narrative. It could very well be that Númenor was attached to Beleriand, but it was a highland. And when Beleriand sank... and that was still there.
Yeah.
The legend became that it was risen from the sea. But we're in the weeds now of hearsay mythology in a mythology. True. So
well, actually, Ryan, I don't know if we've talked about this before, but if you look at the map of like Middle Earth in like the Third Age, those islands off the northwest.
Northwest.
It's like Tol Himling. Up there, it's like near Ered Luin, but like the top part of that. Let me see.
Let me get a big, nice zoomed in map here.
Yes, sir.
Near Ered Luin. I don't see islands, so maybe it's not like zoomed out enough. I'm not sure.
Let me send you this, our classic Lord of the Rings project that we used to use.
Oh, we'd love to see it. We love to see it.
I'll put it in our document here. Yeah, if you guys find a map while we're going through this would help too. I'll put it
probably
in.
Probably a good idea. Or you can go to Lord of the Rings Project, because that always helps.
Oh yeah. So let me see, project map. So do you see Tol, or it's just Himling on this one?
Yes, I do.
So that actually used to be Himring, which was a hill fortress of Maethros, like the son of Feanor. That was one of those highlands that after Balerion sank, it was now an island. It's not shown on this map, but there's another one called Tol Morwen, which is actually the gravesite of...
I remember Tol Morwen now. I remember seeing in maps.
And I love that one because like it pretty much shows, although the family of Hurin was cursed and they got destroyed and like all that kind of stuff, they were never conquered by the sea. Their grave, right? Which is kind of cool.
So at this point, like in real life, there's like from those two ways to get in the Highlands. I think this one is more the third option, which is divine intervention. So
yeah, that makes sense.
As far as I would imagine that if they were going to have it, it was going to have basically all the natural resources that they need to grow a kingdom, and they did, and then influence the rest of the world, which they did. But I would expect that most local climates from Eriador into the wildlands and stuff like that, it's mostly the same. And that's noticeable, at least when you play like Lord of the Rings Online and you're walking through these settings. It's like it feels similar. Again, there's like different regions that are, colorful for the sake of like fantasy world, but there's a lot of pine trees in Middle Earth. Not a lot of people notice that when they're looking at it the first time. There's a lot of pine trees in Middle Earth, especially in northern Eriador.
That's true. Yeah, honestly, that's part of the reason why I like Eriador a lot, is because it's got like the same kind of geography as Colorado, where we're from. Like, I like that, the kind of arid, dry, mountainous stuff.
But then as you get south, you get into more fun, like lush lands.
Yeah,
and that's where Gondor just totally like took over. That's
like
southern,
like Florida,
south of the White Mountains. It's nice. It's really nice down there.
Oh yeah,
I wouldn't say like Florida because Florida is, yeah.
I don't know, man. Like thinking about this kind of stuff. I mean, do you think Gondor would suffer from like hurricanes and that kind of thing?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. The fact that there's not hurricanes in the Middle Earth just tells me like how this really is set in like a European setting. But just looking at like how green everything is, and again, I'm basing this mostly off of LOTR because you don't really get to see how green Gondor is in anything else. But it looks like something that would be like, all right, we got like a hurricane coming in. But because this is supposed to be Europe, they don't got hurricanes in Europe. So it's just not something that ever came up. And
I guess you'd have like tornadoes probably in Rohan and stuff like that. That would make sense.
But even tornadoes, that's like an American thing. There's not many tornadoes in Europe either. I don't think so.
That's fascinating.
Not crazy about.
Our European patrons, let us know if we're wrong here. Do you guys get a lot of tornadoes or hurricanes?
Yeah.
That's fascinating.
Like when I look at this, it feels a lot like Gondor and so that if you're looking at the map, we're gonna exclude the fact that Mordor is Mordor. We're gonna cut that out. If you're looking at the map of Middle Earth, and if I have the Lord of the Rings Project one open, so you can kind of like drag it up and down.
Yeah. That
area from like the White Mountains down until near Harad-ish, that kind of climate, that reminds me a lot of like the warmth of Spain, of Italy.
Yeah.
A little bit less so of Greece, because Greece is so unique with its incredibly highland and isolated geography.
Well, I've seen like theory, like kind of almost theory maps, people drawing their own maps of Middle Earth and stuff, and Harad, like far Harad there, that's like the northern tip of
Africa, exactly. Yeah. And then as you go like north, you get into like the mainlands of like Rohan and Anadrite and stuff like that. That reminds me of like, maybe like the Germany and France kind of stuff. And then as you get farther north, it kind of falls apart a little bit in mainland Eriador, because that reminds me a lot of, I don't know, England with like the hills and
England, like Scotland, like if it was way bigger for sure.
And then the northern ways would be like the very tippy top of like the Nordic countries, or but It kind of falls apart. My analogy kind of falls apart up there, but
it's interesting too, and this is actually a really good segue into our next question. Quantum Catalyst asks, do you think Melkor imbued evil spirits, part of his power, into the Misty Mountains and any mountains when he raised them? So with our like kind of geological discussion, it's fascinating. Melkor actually is part of the reason that like Middle Earth has a sustainable atmosphere at all, because he rose Mount Doom, he rose Thangorodrim, which are like volcanoes, and he also pretty much made the wastes of the frozen wastes of the north. Like the coldness of Forokel is a legacy of Angband, I believe, and Atumno. Just kind of this cold weather that comes from there. So he even though he was evil, he also raised the Misty Mountains to try to hinder the approach of Orome, which is what this question pertains to. And in raising the Misty Mountains, like I've gotten questions about that before. It's like, do you think Melkor knew that there was mithril inside of the mountains when he raised them, or like how did that work? I think it all just kind of happened to be like happenstance. I think if anything, Aule probably knew that there was mithril in there. I don't think necessarily. It's an interesting theory. I've never heard that theory before, because like Karathros is kind of known to be. Gimli almost talks as if it was a person.
Yeah, he talks of it like it's a titan or a god.
Yeah, and exactly. And it's an interesting point. Like perhaps Melkor put some of his power into making these so kind of dangerous, these mountains. It's definitely possible, especially when you consider the fact that the cold, like the hard cold, the snows, the ice, that's a legacy of Melkor and his evils from the early ages of the world. Like it's totally possible. It's really fascinating.
And yeah, remember, like these are all like legends to our characters. True. And it's important to remember the fame narrative when we're talking about stuff like this, because when you think of something like this person is calling this a legacy of Melkor, it reminds them of Melkor, and the story is that Melkor rose these mountains and all this cold. And I'm true. Into it. I'm right there with it. But like from a fantasy perspective, it makes perfect sense. From a realistic world perspective, not as much sense, I guess. Like, how can you own cold?
That's true.
But like, I like it a lot, and I think it's fun, and I enjoy it. As far as like the question with like I think that when he rose, I don't know. I'm just trying to put myself in his place. It's hard because I don't know what it's like being that powerful and that jaded. Just
being like, I'm just gonna raise a mountain range, so Orome has to go around.
But I feel like he would just take what was there in the ground and then just kind of elevate it through magic, right? And so if there was mithril already in the ground, now it's just taller.
That's true, tall. Yeah.
Like I don't think he spawned the mountains out of the void and then placed it on top of the ground. I think he took the ground and then reshaped it into this mountain. And I think that I don't know about imbuing dark spirits, but I think maybe just the fact that he touched it makes it like fearful to people, because when you think about it, the weird stuff that happens on Caradhras, that is all 100% Saruman's doing. I feel like I think that's Saruman messing with the Fellowship. But as far as just climbing a mountain, like that's hard without Dark Lord energy. Like that's hard. Think about the Alps. Think about the Punic Wars. Number 2, Hannibal and your boy coming over the mountains with elephants. He lost all but 2. He brought like 60 elephants to cross the Alps into northern Rome, and he lost all of them but 2 in that crossing. Like,
man,
it's rough to cross mountains on foot. And so, especially in a pre-technological setting. And so, like, whether or not the spirits are working against them, whether or not that's just like a legend or like an old wives' tale,
that
like
makes sense. Well, and so with Saruman, like that I think only happened in the movies where he like messes with the Fellowship and stuff. Because in the book,
I thought in the books Gandalf mentions like there is something ill on the wind.
Yeah, he says, I'm pretty sure. Let me pull up the Fellowship of the Ring. He says that there's a fell voice on the air, and I think somebody responds like, "That's just Caradhras." Let me see. Fell voice.
It's hard because I've watched the movies more than I've read the books, and so.
Yeah.
But I
absolutely.
did read The Fellowship of the Ring more recently than I've seen the movie.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, it's Boromir. We cannot go further tonight, said Boromir. Let those call it the wind who will. There are fell voices on the air, and these stones are aimed at us.
Yeah, Boromir
and then
is an example of a character that grew up with these stories. That like,
True.
his mom telling him, if you're not in bed by the time I get upstairs, Melkor's going to come and kidnap you in your sleep or something like that.
That's true. And Aragorn, so Aragorn responds to Boromir saying, I do call it the wind. Said Aragorn, but that does not make what you say untrue. There are many evil and unfriendly things in the world that have little love for those who go on two legs, and yet are not in league with Sauron, but have purposes of their own. And then Gimli says, Carothras was called the Cruel and had an ill name.
Yeah, it sounds like there's like this this feeling that's ingrained in these people that like, it's that ancient tradition of like when you don't quite understand something, you attribute it to something else.
That makes sense. You attribute it to something you can understand. That makes sense. Yeah, Olympus, that kind of thing.
Exactly, Mount Olympus. It's like, why can't we climb Mount Olympus? It's because the gods are up there. It's like, and then eventually, when they could climb Mount Olympus, because it's just a mountain, they're just like, there's no gods.
All right, it's just a mountain. Yeah. Yeah, so hopefully Metal Guy and Quantum Catalyst, this answered your questions. It's really interesting because Tolkien put so much depth into like the geography of his world even.
I respect, mad respect.
Oh yeah. And it's interesting when we think about Valinor as well. Like, yeah, Royan's right. We don't really have much information to go off of there. Like, we have a map of it, but like it is kind of hearsay because it's the land of the gods, and especially after the end of the Second Age when it was like reshaped and kind of pulled out of, like, it was just the world was changed and all that. We don't know how that changed the geography of Valinor, and also like in the Silmarillion we get a full chapter on like the realms of Beleriand, and then just the Lord of the Rings we just have so much detail throughout that it like crafts the world. But in Valinor, yeah, we don't really have that much, and then. Yeah, so hopefully this helped. All right, so Otherberry asks, is Dior an elf or a man? Dior is the son of Beren and Luthien.
Yes.
When he was born to Luthien, she was no longer an elf, as she'd chosen to come back immortal. I would assume that Dior was a man rather than an elf. Am I way off here?
This is a good question. Because half-elves get to pick, but what do, like, I've always asked, like, does a half-elf's kid... Does that, like, let's say two half-elves have a kid, right?
Mm-hmm.
They both chose to be elf. Is the kid full elf or is the kid a half-elf? Because his parents are half-elves.
So, from how I understand it, it's a really good question. And so, Dior, let me see, Dior.
I don't think Dior is like a half. Well, yeah.
No, so he is. But the interesting thing
why doesn't he get to pick?
Because it's pre-choice. So yeah, that's what I was gonna say. So the thing with Dior,
I'm dumb.
No, you're good. Yeah, so Dior, Eärendil before the choice, Elwing before the choice. The three of them, and then Dior's children, who all got like slaughtered besides Elwing. They are interesting to me because they are half-elves before the choice was given, and I think that makes them mortal. So for me, in my mind, the Doom of Men is the most powerful like fate in all of Middle-earth, and it even triumphs over the Elven fate, except for a couple instances where you have like Tor like sailing off into the sunset with Idril, and it says that Tor becomes an elf, and he like alone of all men, he sundered from that kindred and joined the elves. Now, I love that idea, but that breaks Tolkien's theology like so hard, so I've always struggled to reconcile that moment. I love that idea. But then, if that's the case, why didn't Beren do the same thing? Why was it like, oh, Beren has to die. Oh, Aragorn has to die. Why couldn't they, do the same thing? But pre-choice half-elves, in my mind, are mortal because I think the Doom of Men triumphs the fate of elves. So I think Dior, he's technically a half-elf. Now, his children would be technically 3/4 elf because he marries Nimloth.
So, do they become elf?
I still think the Doom of Men triumphs over them. I do.
So if you have any human in your bloodline, that sucks, bud.
I think like at least pre-choice, because one of his children was like Elwing, And Elwing and Eärendil, of course, go, and then the Valar are like, okay, how do we do this? And then, okay, let's give them the choice. So, from how I take it, is like Elwing and Eärendil. So Elwing was 3/4 elf, but half elf. Eärendil was half elf, and both of them chose to be with the kindred of elves. Now then, their two sons, Elrond and Elros. Elrond chose to be an elf, even though, and he's called Elrond half-elven, but he's technically, like, what would that be, like 5/8? He's like 5/8 elf. I don't even know.
It's close enough. We'll call it.
Yeah, close enough. and then Elros chose to be a man, and he became the first king of Númenor. So I think it was like granted. Now, what's really interesting to me are their children, like
Arwen,
Elros's child, and then like Arwen, Elladan, and Elrohir. Just correct me if I'm saying any of the wrong names. I'm going through so many characters right now.
But, I think you're good on the twins.
Sweet, thanks. Elrond's children, Elrohir and Elladan, and then Arwen. Did they get to choose? Or was it like our dad chose, so we don't have to choose anymore, we're all going to be elves? But then why does Arwen end up dying after she stays in Middle-earth? Like, she kind of dies of a broken heart.
I think that Arwen dies because all the other elves left. And that removes the spirit of the elves. Because I've always thought, and it is an interesting question, I think, is what makes an elf and a human a human? If you don't understand the lore, it's always like elves got long hair. We'll get to that later.
We will.
And they have long ears. But to me, it's always been elves get to live forever and humans don't. That's not ubiquitous in fantasy. I was disappointed in D&D when I figured out that elves actually do die. It just takes a long time.
Me too. That was upsetting.
But, that's always been what it is to me. So my question is, if you are an elf and you, you choose to be mortal, do your ears go away? Do your pointy ears go back to round ears?
I don't think so, because I don't know. Well, and to be fair, I think there's even an argument whether they have pointy ears or not in Tolkien's works.
I think so too, but come on,
yeah,
the pointy ears work. So
oh yeah, and same with the hobbits. We kind of assume hobbits do, but it's not actually. I don't know if it's ever actually stated. I can't remember, but with Arwen, it's interesting. Her death. It could be also that she chose to die because elves could do that. They could die of sorrow. They could choose to kind of give up their lives.
Done. But
I'm out of here. Peace out.
What if she chose to do it? I feel like Elrond wouldn't have been yo, you can't stay here. You're gonna die. You can't do it. So you gotta come with me because I don't want you to die.
That's fair.
So I feel
that's fair. Because she died almost immediately. She died a little bit after Aragorn died. I think the following year. She died in Lothlorien, and so I think it was partially of sorrow, and then they can kind of choose that. I don't know. It's a little bit ambiguous for sure.
Why were all the elves leaving in the War of the Ring? Why were they leaving? They were leaving because they no longer felt a connection to the world. They felt
actually literally right now I have a video ready to release for today that addresses this. Why did the elves leave Middle Earth?
Well, let's get a sneak peek. Why they leave Middle Earth?
Well, so it's it's a lot of reasons. So it's one is that the Valar welcomed them to Valinor originally, and that kind of became their home. So they always kind of felt that calling to come back home. So there was that. They were always bound to the world, so they might as well go to the Undying Lands where all the other immortal people and things dwell, since they have to stay in the world anyway, versus in Middle-earth where it's I have befriended so many humans over my 3,000 years of life and they are all dead. I think at some point that would have kind of pulled on them a little bit. It was even from the beginning, from the Ainu Lindale, that... the dominion of men, it was set by God that eventually elves would leave and the dominion of men would come. So it was a lot of different little things, and that kind of brought it all together. And so, speaking of which, let me you guys get a live moment of me sending out a video. Let me go ahead and publish this then. So I'm like waiting for like the right time, and just like as we kind of record this. So
And
here we
now,
go.
all the patrons that are watching this, you're probably watching this later tonight, maybe tomorrow.
Yeah.
You may have already
We'll
seen
have-
this video right now. So now you're
Yep,
back in the
but-
past.
Oh yeah, yeah. But thanks for being a part of the moment as I release this video. Sweet. But yeah, ultimately there is that that part of like the elven fate, I guess. But the most interesting thing before we move on from like the half-elf question is, you know, you have the Númenórean kings who were all partially elf, right? They're descended from elves. And so the funny thing that like happens as they start to be like, oh my god, we're gonna die, our lifespans are getting shorter, like this is terrible. You would think at like what point does the choice disappear is what I wonder. I think it disappeared after Elros, because I know of a good deal of his like descendants who would have chosen to be elves and then couldn't. So like I wonder, where does that choice disappear along the lineage of half-elves? Because yeah, otherwise one of his descendants, one of the Kingsmen or whatever, like Ar-Pharazôn would have been like, okay,
Yeah, give
I'm
me.
technically partially half-elf, so I'm going to choose to be immortal, and now I'm going to be the immortal ruler of Númenor.
Maybe
So
you need like half and half. I don't know.
that's true. Like or close, because again, I don't think Elrond had exactly half, because his mom was kind of was like 3/4.
That's a good point.
So that's where it kind of disconnects a little bit for sure. So yeah, it's really interesting. Yeah. Anyway, any final thoughts on that?
No, I think we kind of hit that one to death.
Oh yeah. So moving on now. So our Zimrathon asks, did Adûnaic become a dead language after the doom of Númenor? And kind of easy answer for this one.
Yes.
No.
Okay. Define dead language.
Fair.
The definition of a dead language is not when people stop speaking it. It's when it stops getting changed.
True. Stops getting changed. That's interesting.
Because people still speak Latin. That still happens. But there are no, like, think about how the English language adapts and changes, not over 100 years, over like 5.
Fair. That's interesting. So I guess if you define dead language, like
If that's your definition of dead language, then I would say it's dead.
I mean, I don't actually even know about that technically, because I think Adûnaic, it continued on with the Haradrim, it continued on with the Black Númenóreans.
Oh,
yeah.
Then never mind.
from what I can tell. Now, I think what did become a dead language, according to that definition, was Quenya.
Yes.
Because the only people that would speak Quenya were like the High Kings and like the High Elves, and that's pretty much it. So, but I think Adûnaic continued in Harad. It continued amongst the Corsairs, from what I can tell. At least that's kind of how LOTR does it, right? You come across these crazy named Black Númenóreans, and it's like, okay, that's Adûnaic.
Yeah, actually, after looking it up, it's
True.
It's different.
Yeah,
I was always taught that it's like when a language, Latin is considered a dead language because although people still speak it, it's no longer it's no longer evolving as a language. It's no longer changing. But I can see the argument, and now I'm like looking it up in a dictionary. It does say like when it's no longer an everyday spoken one. There's another one here that says it's no longer the native language of any community. Oh. But defining a native language of a community could be confusing and hard to do because
sure. So I guess I don't know. I guess in that case, so Thingol in the first age, after he heard about the kinslaying, he changed. Like he pretty much banned the use of Quenya. Yeah.
No
so
Quenya,
I feel like. Yeah, and like I think sometimes, right, like Quenya did continue because the Númenóreans used it and stuff, but it became like a lot less used, and I think maybe that killed that language after Thingol did that. And then, except for in Valinor, where surely it was still being like used in a native sense for any elves that were born there. And then Sindarin must have died after the elves left at the end of the Third Age, because the only ones to ever use Quenya or Sindarin after the elves left were like high men,
probably, or Bilbo.
Yeah. Well, Bilbo left too.
I was just memeing. Bilbo became like an elvish tutor after he came back.
Honestly, Sam probably did until he left. He probably was like, I once sang the song about Elbereth, and I don't know how I knew the song, but I knew it.
Well, does he remember it now?
Good question. That's facts. That's a good question. I don't know.
I like how we were like, this is going to be an easy answer, and then we both gave different answers.
I guess, yeah, it's when you gave that caveat of like, is it a dead language? I was like, oh, you're right. It's a lot harder to explain, because it would have been easy in that, yes, Adûnaic continued on, but like if you look at all the languages broadly, Khazad-dûl continued on until dwarves left. Like that was not a dead, that never died until like the dwarves did, or until they went underground, whatever. But as long as there were dwarves, Khazad-dûl kept continuing. But like Quenya, King Elisar, that's like Quenya, I believe.
Yeah, and Latin's dead language, but we still like use Latin for the names of lots of things. Just think about government stuff, ex post facto. That's Latin.
Yeah.
So it can still be used to refer to things like that without it being changed or evolving. Yeah, and because yeah, I mean Aragorn. So how I see it is Strider is Common Tongue, Aragorn is Sindarin, and Elisar is Quenya. So like, and this is why I don't like that definition for like that it's no longer native, like the native languages of a community, is because there's a lot of Italians that would say that their heritage is Latin, and if one of them speaks it, like if they studied it, like then it's no longer a dead language according to that definition, which is why I don't like it. Because I think Latin is an absolute dead language because it's so consistent now that it's used for so many things because it's a dead language. It's used for science and stuff like that because the scientific names are Latin names, and because they're not going to change. That the definition of that word is not going to change anymore.
That's true.
There's no more Latin slang.
Yeah, that's so fascinating. Yeah, I guess it really comes down to your definition personally
of a dead language.
Of it. Yeah, so our Zimmerthon, I hope that helps. Yeah. So continuing on, Angel wants to know our thoughts on if Lord of the Rings would be what it is today if Tolkien had stuck with his third version of the manuscript that is written in The Return of the Shadow. Now, I'll be honest, I'm not as familiar with like I need to delve more into like the history of Middle-earth saga at large. I know some of Morgoth's Ring, I know the peoples of Middle-earth because of videos that I've made, but like this I don't know too much about. Although from what I can tell, from what my research is turning up about this is like the story of like if Strider wasn't Strider, but if it was Trotter instead, and like Trotter's a hobbit who had like his feet, I'm pretty sure, cut off by orcs, and then like he had like wooden shoes instead that like made that trotting sound. Like I'm pretty sure if this is the version you're talking about, I mean from just that, like you can tell it's already a lot more grim
and a lot different story.
Yeah. Ryan, you were doing some research before, right?
Yeah. So when we were talking about this before we started recording, I was just looking into some of the stuff, and it's definitely there's a lot of elements of the story that maintains the same, mostly at the beginning, but it's also like big changes that are confusing just by looking at the chapter titles. There's different phases. Phase 1 is very similar to what you could call phase 1 of Lord of the Rings, which is everything from the long expected party to arriving at Rivendell, except the fact that Strider is now a hobbit named Trotter, but they still met him in Bree. So
True. Yeah, true. So like it's kind of almost like placeholders for things. And to be honest, it's really interesting to see like with the Unfinished Tales and how Tolkien worked on his legendarium at large. It seems like he kind of had that, like he had placeholders for things. I mean, like before he came up with the Noldor, it was the gnomes. They were like GNOME.
Oh God, I hate that.
No, yeah, it's interesting. They were actually like the gnomes, and their language was Gnomish, and then that word became Noldor.
I like Noldor way better.
Yeah, me too. And it was the same. Like he had moments like that when he used gnomes as like if you read the Fall of Gondolin book that came out recently, it talks like a lot about the gnomes of Gondolin and all that, like the changes that he made. At the time, instead of calling him Morgoth or Melkor, he called him Melko, just with an O at the end. So it was like, it's interesting because a lot of the bigger things stayed the same.
The bigger themes, like, the bigger story elements,
yeah,
the bigger scenes. Like,
but yeah, they were traded out. Like I know Finrod was originally Finarfin, who in the canon, Finarfin is Finrod's father, but originally that was actually supposed to be Finrod. And like all these things changed around just in terms of names. I'm not exactly sure like why, but I think it has to do with the etymology, the meaning of the words that he used in the names. So yeah, it's fascinating. So like Ryan was saying, I mean it's almost like there were just these placeholders, and Trotter becomes Strider. I know at some point Trotter would tell the story of Beren and Luthien, and so I'm like, okay, so evidently, we know that became Aragorn as we kind of know him, and the story of Beren and Luthien stayed relatively the same. It's fascinating. But from what I can tell, I don't know if it was in this particular manuscript, but I know Tolkien was thinking about it where he was going to have Treebeard as this kind of evil force rather than a force of good, and that he was going to like hinder the Fellowship or whatever it was. And I'm glad at the version that we got because it doesn't seem so dark. It seems like allies in more places than he was originally thinking about having. I don't know. Any final thoughts on that one, Roy?
Yeah, I think as far as like the actual like the question is like our thoughts. I think that Lord of the Rings is very good as it is, and I think that specifically removing the character Aragorn removes so much world building for the kingdom of Gondor and the history of men that if that was not replaced with something, then it would feel like a massive hole in the story for me. And I mean, Lord of the Rings, Aragorn is so huge because he is introduced as a supporting character, but he becomes like almost the main character, I would argue.
Oh yeah. I mean, he becomes the main character of like the side plot, like the subplot,
I would almost argue based on like thematics that the plot with Frodo and Sam, that's the subplot.
That's the subplot.
That's the subplot because that doesn't change that much. So it's Frodo, Sam, and then eventually Gollum hiking for a long time. And they run in like there's things that are important that happen to them. They run into Faramir, like, and he's like, "What you doing?" They're like, "What you doing?" And then they run
true.
into Shelob, and then they run into Mount Doom. But compare those big events to the things that Aragorn's doing. He is fighting off at Helm's Deep, confronting Saruman, going back and like convincing the Horse Lords to join the war effort.
Yeah,
going into the paths of the dead, retrieving the sword and all that, like, and commanding them with it and stuff like that, taking over the Corsair ships, coming back, saving Minas Tirith, and with it all of Gondor, and then going to the Black Gate. Like, it just seems like that's the main story of the War of the Ring, and it wouldn't have been possible to end nicely without this, which we saw at the beginning of this side plot with these hobbits plus Smeagol.
I think what makes it, like, obviously Sam and Frodo were reliant on Aragorn and the host of the West to do what they did at the Black Gate to like destroy the ring.
Yeah.
But I would say that is where it is the subplot of Frodo and Sam.
I think I think it's the main plot, and it's not just because it's more interesting. I think that the plot, Frodo is the main plot all the way up until the breaking of the Fellowship. Then I think it follows the hunters and the hobbits that go into Rohan. That becomes the main plot up until the Battle of Pelennor Fields. Then we transition right back to Frodo and Sam, who I can't remember where they are exactly at that point in their
Do you mean like chronologically, or do you mean like by chapter?
chronologically in their journey? Like, where are they at that point?
So on the 15th of March, which was the Battle of Pelennor Fields. Let me look up. Good old Tolkien Gateway.
Are they past Minas Morgul at that point?
I think they escaped the Tower of Cirithuncle.
Okay, yeah. So like,
yeah.
Huh. That's kind of a big thing. Escaping Cirithuncle. That's Sam's shining hour.
Moment, man. Because then they have 10 days to walk across Mordor, get up Mount Doom, and destroy the ring.
Okay, 10 days for Aragorn to rally the army and march it to the Blackgate feels.
Oh yeah.
He was hustling those boys.
He was. Absolutely. I mean, they had like a day or two to rest. Like they, he healed everybody in the Houses of Healing the night of the Battle of the Pelennor.
Crazy.
Fields. And then I think the next day they had the Council of Captains. I think maybe it was 2 days later.
It had to be the next day for them to make it on time.
Yeah. No, they were hauling, man. They were hauling. But I think because that plot, the Battle of the Black Gate, is contingent on the fact that Frodo and Sam have to destroy the ring. It's like the story couldn't continue from their point of view. It was like, okay, the Eagles have come. We're at the Black Gate fighting for our lives.
Something's going to happen that changes everything.
Yeah.
And they have to succeed.
Happen.
Basically.
Yeah, exactly. We're relying on, we've done everything we could. Now it's back to,
that plot line is affecting our plot line more now.
Exactly. Because obviously, Frodo and Sam, their plot line was affected by the fact that, they drew all the hordes of Mordor to the Black Gate and, the gaze of Sauron for sure. But, there could have been other ways that they snuck through Mordor. It would have taken a lot more time, and likely they would have died doing it. But, I think the Aragorn Gandalf plot at that final moment is contingent on the fact of Frodo and Sam succeeding.
The journey through the, what's his name? The big spiky rocks where they met Gollum. Emmenwheel, and then through the marsh, and then through Ithilien. All that, the only thing that they do that affects the other plotline in that point is talk to Faramir. And then Faramir takes that knowledge, and then he looks at Pippin and he's like, whoa!
Yeah. I've seen somebody like you.
So, that's where I think that, and then on the other side, it's Aragorn making up a ruckus in the Wilderlands is drawing the Dark Lord's attention, allowing them to continue their journey. Relative secrecy.
That's fair. Yeah, I mean, definitely in the Two Towers, that feels like the main plot at Helm's Deep and all that, because they're fighting on behalf of a kingdom of men against one of the big evil
Which brings
forces,
up the massive problem, the only massive problem I have with Lord of the Rings, and I think the only reason I have it as a problem is because I've read other books that were made way later that do this, is that he didn't break up that story with in between the two of them. Because you have a straight shot. The first half, over half of the Two Towers is all the hunters, plus some Pippin chapters, some Pippin Merry chapters in there. Mm-hmm. And then the back half is all Frodo and Sam and Gollum. And it just feels like after all the excitement that's happening, it's hard to come back and read 150 straight pages of Sam and Sam yelling at Gollum and Gollum going
Yeah, I mean it's funny because you're definitely right with the Emmenwheel Dead Marsh. Those kind of early chapters of that plot line, those are pretty hard to really just get through, because
they should be at the beginning of the story, I feel like.
Yeah, because you just got through Helm's Deep and them talking to Saruman, and it's oh, Pippin looked into the Palantir, we're going to Gondor, let's go, and then
freeze frame.
Yeah.
Here's what's been happening on the other side, and you're like, oh my god.
I
think
and it's funny because by the time I think they leave the Dead Marshes, or Emmenwheel / Dead Marshes, around that time, that's chronologically speaking, that's when Gandalf is talking to Saruman. It took them that long to get through Emmenwheel and Dead Marshes. Yeah. It took them the amount of time that they did Helm's Deep and all of that, 4 days, 5 days.
And so I don't see why they can't the sprint across Rohan 2 times is crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, dude, like,
not.
when you think about Aragorn's like sleep, like, and Gimli's sleep and Legolas's sleep, they really, until after they take down Saruman, it's rough, man. I think like they were running the Battle of Helm's Deep on like a couple hours of sleep over the past like 3 days, like, and that was a battle at night too. I mean, Aragorn just like if this was
those people are
if this was
but if I was gonna republish Lord of the Rings, if I was like talking to Tolkien, I was like, if I was the editor, I'd be like, all right, listen, everything you got here is fantastic. Let's have like the first chapter being the first chapter of Two Towers being like Frodo and Sam, that first chapter of Emondwell, and then we cut back to the hobbits who have been captured by the orcs, and then we cut back to the meeting of Gollum, and then we cut back to the chasers or the hunters. I don't know why I said chasers. Like I would just do this like flip flop back and forth to keep the action going. That's what like Game of Thrones does, and like when you do it like that, you open yourself up to a very interesting storytelling where it's like you watch something happen from one person's perspective, and then you cut to another person who's maybe slightly before that time, and then you watch them from their removed reaction. Or maybe you cut to another perspective and it's been a while, and they're like, oh, I heard about this thing that happened, and it's like, I just read that. Like
yeah. Yeah, that's true. It could have, like, I know Tolkien wrote it in books.
Yeah, he wrote it in books, which is why it's like that. And it's like, here's the book of Frodo and Sam and then Gollum, and here's the book of everybody else.
Yeah.
I just feel like if I was going to read the Hunter's book first and then go back and read the Frodo and Sam book, I would be so bored. And I was bored.
It's kind of interesting because like it's funny. Like I feel like in the Two Towers, Sam, Frodo, Gollum in the beginning of their book have the slowest chapters, but honestly at the end, the Shelob stuff, the Kira,
it gets fun at the end.
Like it gets like arguably even more fun
What's
than
going on the other
Helm's
side.
Deep. Yeah, then the Battle of Helm's Deep. And
I don't know about that.
All of that.
I don't know about that.
No, I mean on a personal level at least, because that chapter reading Sam being, saying, Gollum is on Sam's back and Frodo is in front of him getting stabbed by Shelob, and then he just goes like haywire because and he's compared to
really
Turin
good,
and Baron,
it's
and
about Helm's Deep,
it's really good.
I would call it way more interesting than everything after the Battle of Helm's Deep, with like the confrontation of Saruman and then the return to Edoras. Dude, come on, that's Helm's Deep, man. Don't come for my Helm's Deep.
I know. I love my Helm's Deep, but I guess it's really. I just remember the last time that I was reading Two Towers, I was like, really. It's always at the end of Two Towers where I just feel so hyped for my boy Sam and all of that. And even though I do feel that hype with Helm's Deep, it's just. It always hits different when I read those the last chapter or two of the Two Towers in Sam and Frodo's part. It's just, it's amazing. So sorry, Angel. I hope we kind of answered some of your question. We just derailed onto a general topic about the Lord of the Rings.
It's okay, though. We'll make it up for you with your next question, which is also.
Yeah. So yeah, Angel also asks what if the One Ring hadn't been found by Deagle and had been left in the Anduin River? Do you think it would have taken longer to find? And would the orcs or even the Nazgul know where to start looking? If this had happened, I think Saruman would have found it first. Yeah, he was looking for it. He knew roughly where it was. One of his brigands, I'm almost definitely sure, would have found it before anybody else. And then he would have kept it secret from the White Council. He would have studied it, and then he would put it on. And then the elves and Gandalf, so Galadriel, Elrond, and Gandalf, who wore the 3 Elven rings, would have immediately known, oh no,
the One Ring's
oh no.
And then they would go to Saruman,
it's been fun.
And they would think, the One Ring.
They would know it was Saruman.
Oh, really?
They would know. Oh yeah, they would know it's Saruman, because in the Second Age, when Sauron put on the One Ring for the first time, all the elves who knew, so Gil-galad, Círdan, and Galadriel, who had their Elven rings, they knew immediately that it was Sauron and that they were betrayed. And then vice versa, Sauron was like, "Oh, they have Elven rings. What is this? I didn't ask Celebrimbor to do this. I'm betrayed." So then they immediately were aware of each other.
But does that mean that
because,
like Galadriel knows that Galadriel and Elrond know every time Bilbo puts on the ring that he's put on the ring?
It's possible, but the thing is that Bilbo's not trying to dominate their minds because he's not powerful enough. So like Saruman would put it on, and because of his sheer power, yeah. So like that's really why they would immediately know, because of the power of the person wearing the ring. That it was Saruman.
Because then by that argument, I feel like so that makes more sense. But like if that wasn't it, I was just asking because if when Bilbo first puts on the ring in The Hobbit, Gandalf's right there.
True.
Whoa.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's hard. It's kind of weird in the Hobbit, especially how the One Ring works, because it's
retconned.
Definitely. Yeah, it is definitely like Bilbo puts it on and Sauron's like not even, he doesn't care, bro. But then Frodo puts it on. Yeah. I sleep when Bilbo puts it on. Frodo puts it on. Is this real? Like, yeah. No, so I imagine if Deagle wouldn't have found it, Saruman would have been the first to find it. He would have put it on, and there would have been this war within the White Council itself. And I believe Saruman would have lost that war.
But Sauron would have come to be like, hey, I'll help, and then stab him in the back. Guaranteed.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, true. I don't even know if he would have helped Saruman because it's his one ring.
No, I think he would have trickeried, like, Saruman, you're in a rough place here. Let me help you. And Saruman's like, oh, thank you.
I got armies.
I need help. And then boom, he's dead.
And then Sauron has his ring back. Yeah, that's fair.
Deagle saved Middle-earth, bro, by finding that and then immediately dying.
Hashtag Deagle is the real hero.
Deagle's the real ring bearer, bro.
Yeah, dude. Where's his ship going into the West, man? So moving on to our final question from the patrons. Marion Baggins asks, what moments in Arda or Tales of Middle-earth that have never been like seen on screen, what would we love to see? Tom Bombadil? I mean, dude, I've got so many.
That's the obvious one. That's the obvious choice. It's the most obvious choice. Like, because it's just such a fun character that I feel like everybody would like.
Yeah. Absolutely. And especially the memers. The memers would love Tom. For me, I think there are so many, right? The Angmar War, the Gondorian Civil War.
That's all great. But Tom Bombadil could have made it in. If we're gonna decide like, oh, I want to see this moment on screen time, we have to make a movie around that, and we have to include all this stuff, which I love. We should do it, but
because I was gonna say Children of Húrin, all that.
Oh, the Children of Húrin, I think should be like a video game. I think that would be a sick Skyrim-esque video game.
Be so hype. But if we're talking in Lord of the Rings that they didn't include, that I would have, like with Royan saying, like Tom Bombadil, that would have been an extra 20 minutes or whatever.
Well, you'd also need the Barrow-wights. Maybe like an extra 40 minutes.
Yeah, extra 40 minutes for the Barrow-wights. And
plus Tom Bombadil.
I think I would say that too, and then I honestly, just for story reasons, I would say Scouring of the Shire would be my extra, extra 30 minutes.
You need that to complete their arc.
Yeah, I agree. It would have shown just how far they had come, and it didn't have to be even as big as it happened in the books, but just if they didn't kill Saruman,
and confronted Saruman. And then it's
Saruman is in the midst of taking
these four hobbits who Saruman thought is like a complete afterthought when he first saw them earlier. Mm-hmm. And they're now these heroes, and they came back to save their homeland. Like, I feel like that doesn't need to be long, but it's definitely an important scene. But because all the other stuff already happened beforehand, I can kind of see why it was cut, but it's disappointing.
Yeah, for sure. I think I would say Scouring of the Shire just for those character arc moments. But in terms of all of Arda, like if I could choose one thing, if the movie was coming out tomorrow, what would I want that movie to be? Probably Children of Húrin, because I'm currently reading that one. So
I would do Angmar.
Probably Children of Húrin.
I think I would do Angmar War for sure. Because I think that could be. Nice. I mean, one movie probably wouldn't cover it, but I think it's just such an interesting point in Middle-earth history, and it could spawn so much interesting, discourse and more interest in like the past of Lord of the Rings and all that. And it's just a fantastic story, I think, as far as like, because you could, how far back do you want to go? Like, because you could go pretty far back with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it would be. There's so much that I'd love to see. So much. So, yeah. Okay, let's jump into the news. So Andy Serkis is doing audiobooks for The Lord of the Rings. That came out last month. Yes, sir. He did one for The Hobbit, and it was like everybody loved it.
Well, I remember he read The Hobbit on stream during quarantine. It was amazing. It was fantastic. Everybody loved it.
And then I think they had him come back after that to be like, hey, let's make like an official audiobook.
We'll pay you. And he was like, okay.
Yeah, we'll pay you. Yeah, no problem. So I think those come out in September, if I'm not mistaken, and they'll be all on Audible. Yeah, and that'll be cool. He's like, you know, we're getting little trailers and moments of that, and it's pretty cool. He's a really not only are his voices good and Gollum, right? It's good to hear Gollum again in his voice, but just the narration at large. It actually kind of reminds me of the narrator in the Hobbit video game that came out in like the 2000s. That narrator, so it's really good stuff.
So
speaking of
the 16th of September, it comes out on like Audible and other retailers like that. On the 14th of October, it'll come out as a CD.
Oh, cool. Okay. Yeah, no, we got that to look forward to. I didn't know it was coming out on a CD, but sweet. Speaking of Gollum, we have a new Gollum game trailer, and what are your thoughts on that, Ryan?
I was a little worried that like I was the only person that felt like this, so I did some research, and I'm absolutely not. Does the Gollum game look like something that could be well made and fun to play? Yes. Follow-up question. Why did, of all the games to make in Middle-earth, of all the like lore expanding games that you could make that could still be considered canon, like, why Gollum? And why this story of Gollum? Why doesn't this campaign of Gollum go up through the War of the Ring? Why can't I play as Gollum during the Fellowship? And it's like you can see that from his position. It's just like this, and I don't know what the story's going to be, but it just feels like, why did we make this game?
Yeah, I think it'll be a bit more of like a stealth puzzle game like, as well, because
why did somebody be like, you know what we need? You know what the Lord of the Rings universe needs right now? A Gollum stealth puzzle game.
Or a Gollum
it's like
game. Yeah. And I say puzzle because it looks like they're doing the Gandalf Thranduil part of the plot, which means we'll see our boy Aragorn, and Aragorn will capture Gollum, bring him into Mirkwood, and then perhaps the puzzle part is like him trying to escape Mirkwood. Or
I think there's like a lot of puzzle stuff in like Mordor that could also work.
Yeah, and I don't know how, to be fair, I don't know how far into the future this will go. Perhaps it goes to you actually like jumping Frodo and Sam in Emondwell. It could go that far, to be honest, because it could be that it's all of like his Mordor exploration getting captured and then getting captured by Aragorn and going to Lothlorien and then, or like going through Lothlorien to Mirkwood.
I feel like that would be hard to play in a game mode. It's like, all right, I could see sneaking around Mirkwood, or sorry, Moria. I could see that as like a game. You're trying to follow the Fellowship and keep up with them, but then the river. It's like, all right, you're gonna get on this log and you're gonna sit on this log.
You're gonna swim
for like an hour.
Yeah, don't get hit by anything, and make sure you stay far enough away from the Fellowship. It could be that the Gollum game actually goes all the way through to the end of his life, which would actually, like you're saying, Ryan, with the Fellowship and you help out Frodo and Sam. That could be the case where you actually go all the way to him dying in Mount Doom, but which would actually add more hype to the whole thing, I think. The game ends with you dancing because you got your precious back, and then you slip and fall, and that's that. So we'll see. I mean, yeah, it's getting better. I can tell there's passion behind it.
Yeah, absolutely. And the graphics are looking better. It's just the premise of the game is always going to be a question to me of like, because clearly there's money going in this project. It's like, why this project?
Mhm.
But
Yeah, why not a Rangers of the North against Angmar
Dude,
project or
mad
Gondorian
slaps.
Civil War project?
Mad slaps.
Mad slaps. Be
You
amazing.
could even.
All right, and now.
I'm done.
Oh, sorry.
Now.
Oh, okay. And now we finally have
God.
our big news of the month is so I'm going to preface this. So the new Amazon show has a spy report from the OneRing.net, and my good friend Clifford Broadway is the writer of this article that has the spy report. We're good. Yeah, I'm good friends with the guy, and but I'm gonna preface this, and I said the same thing on Twitter.
You got me.
Like, well, yeah, I'll say that too. So yeah, I take this with a grain of salt because any kind of spy reporting is and has always been a little bit. They could be off. I mean, I remember Game of Thrones kind of having all those spy reports, and so many of them were off and different. But yeah, no. So I said that on Twitter. I was like, take it with a grain of salt. And then the OneRing.net replies to me and with a GIF from Game of Thrones of what was that? It was Olenna Tyrell being like,
it was because you said like we don't know where this is coming from, and
yeah, we can't trust the source necessarily.
And when you have an unnamed source close to the project, like, come on. Who's your name? Is that the Boom Kid who's actually like on set watching these things happen, or is that like?
Is it a guy with a camera who's outside of the fence that's like that might be filming the correct things, or is it Amazon being like, hey, here you go, here's a little bit of information for you. Just say it's from an anonymous source, but we want you to kind of build some anticipation for us. I could see that too.
But yeah, why? Why would release a trailer?
Release a trailer. Yeah, release a teaser, release 15-second teaser.
Like they did for Wheel of Time. Now the Wheel of Time, they've been talking about it for weeks.
Yeah, absolutely. And another part of me that's a little bit skeptical is I follow Fellowship of Fans like primarily for my news from Amazon, from the Amazon show. And I know he has connections within the Amazon show to where he gets a lot of his information. And a lot of it's been proven correct. But he wasn't the one reporting this. Like, he didn't get this spy report, and it was somebody else. It doesn't mean that could be wrong, but I would be curious as to hear why he also didn't have similar information or what. But I don't know. So we'll go through this. But yeah, just take it with a grain of salt. Again, I love Cliff Broadway. He's a good friend of mine. But and I don't mean to disrespect him with any of this if we're a bit skeptical, but. Yeah, so
healthy skepticism until proven right. That's what I've found with this project is required. Like this whole process.
Yeah.
All right. So there's like a lot of stuff that this goes into. I think the number one thing I want to talk about first that is like massive is that according to this spy report, the Tolkien estate is very happy with how the progress of the show is going. That is a fantastic piece of news for all of you fans who are like really worried about a lot of the stuff. According to the spy report, they're very happy. Now that we're past the good part, we're going to get to the weird part, which is how are they happy after hearing all this stuff that we're about to tell you are also, according to this like spy report gonna happen.
I mean, part of it is this is the weirdest part, and this is where I am the most skeptical. And it could be because Christopher Tolkien passed away, that like the stalwart guard of the Silmarillion who was like, nope, you can't have any rights to it. No. It says confirmed for the first time ever, elements and passages from the Silmarillion and the Unfinished Tales are licensed by Amazon Studios for this adaptation. And it could be, like, hopefully it would be the last two chapters, the Akhelabeth and the Downfall of Numenor, and then also of the Rings of Power in the Third Age. Just those last two sections. Hopefully it is that, but it's weird. It's really odd to me that we haven't had like big news saying that the Tolkien estate is like, yes, it has our stamp of approval.
Massive copyright like news across the world.
It would. Because everybody has been waiting to get their hands on the Silmarillion. So it's just weird that not only is it Amazon who would get first crack at it, but that it's the OneRing.net providing proof, like, quote-unquote proof for this, because recently, especially on Twitter, the OneRing.net has been a bit more clickbaity than usual. They've been a little bit more trying to grab stuff. Yeah, to say it lightly. They've been kind of going off the rails sometimes, and it's kind of annoyed me because I always have had a great respect for the OneRing.net. So hopefully they're not just pulling this out for like clicks and speculation on their behalf, but I'll give them the benefit of the doubt that they're not. So Amazon does have merchandising rights, and 3 lore experts / Tolkien scholars were on set for a time during production. I know one of them was Tom Shippey, and but we know that they also left the project. At least Tom Shippey did. And so, what does that say? I don't know.
And we've talked about that
it's
before.
Weird, but
did he leave because he doesn't like what's going on, or did he leave because he was just there for the script?
Done.
And now the script was then finalized. We don't know. We don't know what's going on because nobody will tell us anything. And then when they do tell us, they come in these long spy reports that are honestly pretty clickbaity. Even the spy report is pretty clickbaity.
Yeah.
But there's like also stuff that is according to like this spy report are confirmed that are just really weird. More logistic stuff, like they talk about how there's been a fake production team doing fake decoy footage. Makes
so weird. That's so odd
weird.
To me.
That doesn't make sense to me because when Game of Thrones did it, they did it to. I remember they made news that they did it going up into season 6, I want to say, and they did it to try to hide that Jon Snow was resurrected, and then that still got out anyway. Also, anybody with a brain, like Jon Snow's not going to stay dead, especially not with the way that the show is going at that point.
True. And it costs so, like, the thing is that's weird is it costs so much money to have all those people on a fake set doing fake filming, so maybe somebody sees it and reports it to divert news away from the actual legitimate things. I don't know. And this is what makes me a little skeptical of this article at large as well. Maybe they're just saying that because it like, maybe there is no fake filming going on, but in reporting that, it helps the Amazon show because they say, oh, don't believe everything you hear because we have fake reporting, even though, or we have fake recording.
We're in like 5D chess playing games. Could be Amazon is telling you that there's fake recording so that when you hear things, you're like, oh, maybe it's not true. And then it comes out to be true. Like,
maybe.
I don't know. It just sounds,
exactly.
Just sounds like for a project that already costs so much money, that they're putting so much money into this, and that they have to split that money between like the 2 big seasons or whatever. How much of your budget are you going to put into trying to fake people out? And how does that help
just to maybe
your business
fake people
practice? How does how does keeping the show points secret, this degree of secrecy, how much does that cost? And it costs a lot because a lot of people don't understand how much it costs running a production. How much it costs, because it's just simply like, oh, we're gonna have like 10 actors that are playing fake characters, and they're probably unknown actors, so they have to get like paid. You could even pay them like next to nothing. But in order to make it believable, you have to have so many people, so many crew members on that set. And are you going to tell all these people that it's a fake? Because if so, they're like, hey, you're going to be on. I'm telling 100 crew members and like 10 cast members, like, all right, guys, you're going to be on a fake set. It's like, okay, we're on the fake set. The other set's the real set.
This is why. Yeah, this is why I'm doing my this is why I wanted to become an actor. So I could fake set people.
Well, to be fair,
Twitter.
like being an actor is rough. I always thought this really funny meme. It's like, if you ever want your kid to be not an actor, but they're looking at it, like send them to me. I'll take them on a field trip to New York. We'll go outside of the Broadway musical, and we'll see the people that aren't actors, but like are out dancing in the streets, trying to like handing out like informational forms. And I'm going to turn to the kids and I'm going to say, somebody auditioned for that and didn't get it. Like being an actor kind of sucks, not gonna lie.
Ooh.
So
I mean, not to like degrade actors or anything, but like that would be so demeaning being like, so Yoyston, we know you're playing Sauron, but like we need you to be in a fake set for a week. none of this matters. You're fine. Just hang out. I'd just say, really,
and, like in order to make it believable,
something good
for the directors,
project.
they have to be directors that we like realize are directors. It's like, okay, in order to make it a believable thing, it's just there's just way too many questions with no answers. That just doesn't make sense to me. And when you think about it, when you think about a lot of this stuff critically, especially these logistic points, it just kind of starts to fall apart for me. Maybe I'm being crazy. Maybe I'm not thinking about everything, but like, come on.
Yeah, it's a little weird to do that. And I mean, speaking of production, they're aiming for a mid-2022 release, so probably next summer, which sounds about right, to be honest. I actually thought maybe they'd get a little sooner, but at the rate production is going, that would still be
So why would you do a fake for a first season? You have no idea if this project's going to flop or not. Why would you spend this much money on it?
True. And it would also waste time because, like, this show has already taken so many years, as we keep talking about. It's taken so many years to get going. Why would you waste any time with fake stuff?
And there's, like, other stuff that's, like, other logistics stuff that's very, So the fake sets was the big thing. The scripts are being digitally shared using something to, like, track who's accessing it. That, I think, is believable. That sounds like Amazon. They've sequestered the actors for the men, elves, and dwarves in their own production units. Why?
And this is speculation I saw elsewhere. Maybe it's going to be kind of an anthology, at least in season
makes
1,
sense.
where
but like
a couple episodes are all men, a couple episodes are all elves.
Think about the word sequester. I don't know if this is simply like, they have different spots for this, but to me, sequestering a jury, they're not allowed to talk to each other. That doesn't make any sense to me, but maybe I'm going too deep into that one word. The other thing that's like, I think is absolutely probably correct, Lord of the Rings and Wheel of Time are sharing crew and directors. Directors less so. Crew absolutely makes sense. Like these are large fantasy shows that are being shot at the same time. Like you're gonna have like same crew for both of them. That makes perfect sense to me. Aiming for the mid 2022 release. We know that'll get delayed again. Don't even write that down. It's not.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point.
Now here's where we get the crazy like lore stuff. It is allegedly confirmed that we have, I believe the quote was, proto-hobbits. And this is the thing where I've been like reading online discourses and I agree 100%. It's like the Tolkien estate is absolutely very happy with what's going on. Oh, but we're throwing proto-hobbits into the Second Age. Like what?
about 3,000 years ish or so, give or take, before they actually appear in the Legendarium. But yeah, it'd be fun.
Like
it's weird.
The short-haired elves, which we'll get to later. But like what? This doesn't make sense.
I don't. Yeah, I mean, I guess if they want to show Vales of Anduin or like Dunland or Enedwaith or whatever, where you have, and again, this is way later. I guess I shouldn't say. I mean, it could be 3,000 years depending on where we're at in the Second Age. But if way later, Harfoots are in Enedwaith, or you have like the early hobbits in, the Vales of Anduin. And to be fair, Lord of the Rings Online did do something like this with the whole Bitlan being in the War of the Last Alliance, and it worked. I actually think this could work, but it's interesting as why. Like, what? Okay, are they going to be in the War of the Elves and Sauron, where you just see some halflings getting just like bodied?
I can even understand.
I don't know,
like, because records are lost over time. The frame narrative with Lord of the Rings, they only have certain knowledge of proto hobbits going back so far. So like you could have something that's like they're in their own little prehistory, but if they do anything major, then that's going to be remembered by somebody. So it would have made it into from like a timeline perspective, that would have made it to prosperity, that knowledge that happened. And if it didn't, if they don't do anything major, why include them? Why are they in the show?
True. And obviously, if they do something major, which would likely be the case in a show like this, it's very different from the lore, which goes back to what you said about why is the Tolkien estate happy about this? Because it does And again, we're okay with diverging from the lore as long as it makes sense and is keeping with the themes if it's for a purpose. But the first notable Hobbit who like fought somebody, who killed a big goblin or whatever, was Bolrora Took, and that was still mid to late Third Age.
Way in the future from this point.
So it's odd. It's weird. I mean, speaking of like things and peoples, I mean, you have ice trolls instead of cave trolls. Again, talking about licensing, it's weird that they would have the rights to parts of the Silmarillion, but they wouldn't have rights to the Cave Troll.
Yeah, so that's the next thing, is that Warner Brothers has a
Brothers
license on Cave Troll. I don't know how. I'm nowhere close to a copyright lawyer. I don't know how that works, but it sounds believable to me. Believable enough.
It's just odd. It's odd that you have the rights to the Akalabeth.
Cave
you don't
Troll.
have rights to Cave Troll.
Doesn't make sense to me. But
yeah, no.
I do think it's believable because I think it probably has something to do with the fact that like Warner Brothers has rights to merchandise things in Lord of the Rings still, I think, and that's part of that made a scene. It was a very big scene in Fellowship of the Ring, and so they have rights to it. But it's annoying from a fan perspective, but also not game breaking to me. The nudity thing. We're back at nudity. So if you remember months ago, we talked about how a intimacy director was hired by the show, and we're like, what does that mean? And everybody lost their mind over it. According to the spy report, the nudity is sparse and not sexualized. So I would think of this kind of like, if anybody's seen Westworld, the first season of Westworld, where nudity is omnipresent but not sexualized.
It's odd. I mean, Tolkien either uses it to like in a very biblical way to display almost naivety and kind of just youngness, a youngness of mind or whatever, or either he uses it for that or in a brutal death kind of way where we see Celebrimbor stripped with arrows shot through him and he's pretty much crucified.
It sounds like the brutal parts are what the nudity is going to be for, because it talks about subjective concentration camp type visuals is such a weird phrase to me, but like just think of like people who have been so like brutalized and trodden upon that like they're just naked in the dirt. Like that's the kind of visual they're going for. And a harrowing portrayal of corruption of the elves, I think,
which is years of the trees.
Crazy.
So that's 2 ages before Second Age.
We've had flashbacks before.
But this is early Silmarillion stuff.
And if they have rights to it, that would make sense. They have like somebody's explaining where orcs come from, and you have like a flashback scene as in a voiceover.
That's fair, but we'd have to see Morgoth.
Would you?
We'd have to see. Well,
no,
we don't have to. I mean, I guess he could have a Balrog do it to them. Like I'm trying to think, Melkor's early servants. I guess you could show Sauron, but according to this very report, we're not going to see Sauron in the first season.
I don't even think you need to watch.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't even think you need to have a person doing the corruption as much as you can just focus. Like the camera could be on the victim that's being corruptionized.
That's fair.
And that way, they could get around something like that.
That's fair.
You know, it's possible, but
they'll have to explain. They'll also have to explain it. You know, they can't just say they were turned into orcs. They're going to have to say Morgoth, our enemy of old. In the early days, you know, they turned elves into orcs, and you know, I don't know. It's just it'd be really interesting to see.
So yeah.
And I guess I realized like we both sound pretty cynical in this. Like we both sound very skeptical.
It sounds weird.
It does sound weird, and it feels. I just feel like this
even
is
if it was true,
I could be wrong.
It feels like from this point of view, a spy report. This could be that we could be lacking so much context that would make everything clear. So true. I'm trying not we're gonna resound like we're totally roasting this. And to be fair, there's a lot of this that it's like
we kind of are.
This doesn't make sense. Like, come on.
Yeah. I mean,
we're missing things. Sorry. Obviously, we're missing a ton of information, and they could do something really smart with it that like technically makes everything here true. That could still be good. Like I could see that happening. I could see this being quality.
Oh, absolutely.
But like, let's keep going a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, so like to kind of caveat as well, and I just noticed this as we were going through the article. At the very bottom, it says, tune into the OneRing.net like Tuesday as Quickbeam breaks down all these juicy spy reports in detail. This was last week. But it says we still have a long way to go until Amazon's Lord of the Rings TV show releases. So if you hear anything, drop a note to spymaster@theonering.net. That gives me pause because who is this source? Did somebody just DM them on Twitter or like drop an email being like, here are all the bullet points because this is how it was broken down. Here are all the bullet points of things that will likely happen.
Well, they probably have to DM
was it just
them,
somebody,
and then they probably have to confirm it somehow. But I don't.
I mean, only one thing, to be fair, that we've read here has said confirmed, and that was the very first thing. It says confirmed for the first time ever, elements and passages from the Silmarillion and Unfinished Tales. Everything else does not say confirmed like that. So, I don't know. I have no idea. Did this just come
by who? That didn't make the news. So, confirmed, like you confirmed it with your secret source. And how do you confirm something with the secret source?
Yeah, exactly.
Tell people?
Was it confirmed by the Tolkien estate? And if so, Tolkien estate should
where's
say
the proof of the the point of confirmation is that there's supposed to be proof, visible proof. So when you confirm something, you can't just say, "Oh, this has been confirmed." It's like this has been confirmed, and here's the confirmation. Boom, show it to you. We don't have that here. Anyways, you mentioned that Sauron/Anatar will not be revealed in season 1. Now we get to the big questions for me. Does this mean A, Sauron's not in season 1, or 2, Anatar's in season 1, but it's not revealed to be Sauron?
Ooh, that would be
would be a good idea. Not having an antagonist for a show sounds dumb. So if Sauron's not in season 1, they have to introduce an antagonist to the scene, which could be a hit or miss. Introducing characters into something like this. They have to be really careful with it. They have to be really smart with it. It's going to be required for running something like this because there's just not enough story to this story in the original writing.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I'm trying to think of any other conflict not involving Sauron within the first 1,000 years of the Second Age, and I can't think of anything. No. Nope. I can't think of a single thing. Like, you might have problems with the Easterlings if you want, but I think they kept to themselves while the Westerners
it sounds like the majority of this plot is going to be centered around the war of elves and Sauron. So maybe that's not going to happen yet. Like, this is the precursor to that, but the precursor to that was like Happy Peacetime. It's hard to have a television show about Happy Peacetime.
Yeah.
The last thing was that elves are going to have short hairstyles. That sounds... Why?
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like, to be fair, again, some elves in Lord of the Rings Online have shorter hair, but it's just interesting that this is...
Yeah, why is it? I feel like it wouldn't be reported unless like all of them do, in which case it just kind of feels weird. It's an aesthetic choice, and it's also an aesthetic choice that's described a lot, I feel like. It's like this elf has long flowing hair. Like, I feel like that's a quote from somewhere, I don't know. But it just kind of sounds kind of weird. I don't know.
Yeah, it is a little odd. But okay, like that's fine. I mean, I mean that's fine for me at least. So it says also that the Celebrimbor, like the role of Celebrimbor, has been recast. Tom Budge was in that role, and we have a picture like in this article. Yeah, we have a picture of Tom. Yeah, he looks like an elf, like very similar features.
Tom Budge is, awesome. I believe, an Australian actor. I'm pretty certain. I know he was in Gallipoli, which is a movie that came out in like 2015 about World War I. I don't know if he's been in anything else.
He looks like, the more I look at him, he would have looked the part for an elf for sure. I think he probably would have done a good job. But yeah, I mean, we'll see. We'll see how all of this plays out. Yeah, again, hopefully it wasn't too... we weren't just bashing it too much, but I'm just very skeptical. I don't know. I'd love to hear what you all think in Discord and in on Patreon. But are we being too cynical? Are we not being cynical enough? Are we being too skeptical, just let us know your thoughts. Hopefully, again, Rowan and I've kind of always taken the same standpoint on this. It's just
cautiously optimistic
until we get something. Yeah, cautiously optimistic. Until we get something, we know nothing for sure. That's why it's best to take this with a grain of salt. But we're hopeful. So yeah, is that going to wrap it up for us,
that's
Ryan?
Basically everything. We kind of went through that whole thing. We kind of got all of the things off the chest that we need to say.
Yeah, I mean, we have a link to it in the description, at least on the YouTube version of the podcast. So if you guys want to check the report out for yourself at theonering.net. And again, hopefully this is faithful, legitimate reporting. I grew up loving and like knowing and respecting the onering.net. And yeah, any final thoughts on anything, Ryan?
No, I think we're good. Thanks for watching, and listening.
Yeah. Sounds good. As always, Ryan, thank you for joining me. I want to thank our Valar tier patrons for continuing to support us. Adrian De la Torre, Chris Ortner, Peter Sheppard, Jonathan Putnam, Mark Kralick, Blair Scouten, Tobias Göldner, Merten, John Hume, Tom Bombadil, Reggie93, Jennifer Wood, Sam McBee, Matt Sibbach, Quantum Catalyst, Elizabeth Calvert, Maz Gibs, Ben Gardner, and Kondar. And thank you to you guys. Thank you to all of our patrons. It really means a lot. I'm getting much better at saying all of those names sequentially. So, my friends, thank you all so much for joining us on this adventure. Until the next one.